Hello, I'm Anie Mayelian.
And I'm Aleen Mayelian. We're from the Mayelian Apartment Group. We specialize in apartment building sales in LA, and today we have a special guest with us. This is Helen Fower. She's with One Structural, and we're going to discuss balcony retrofitting laws, including SB 721. Thank you for being here, Helen.
Of course, thank you guys. My pleasure to be here.
So just tell us a little bit about what you do, what One Structural does.
Okay. So my name is Helen. I'm the director of One Structural. We're a multifamily construction company. We have 3 divisions with 3 specialties for multifamily. Retrofit One, which specializes in seismic retrofitting, also known as earthquake retrofitting for soft story buildings. ADU One, which specializes, as the name suggests, accessory dwelling units, specifically for multifamily properties. And then, of course, Balcony One, which refers to the new balcony inspection mandate, SB 721 and SB 326.
Great. Wow.
Helen, turning to a hot button issue about apartment buildings owners this year, tell us about the SB 721.
Sure. So SB 721 and its, sister bill were passed in 2019, actually. So this has been in effect for quite some time now. And what these bills require is that every single multifamily property, whether it's an apartment or a condo community with 3 or more units, must get their exterior elevated elements inspected every 6 or 9 years. And these elements are things such as balconies, of course, decks, walkways, porches, stairways with landings and handrails, and all of their associated waterproofing structures and elements must get inspected. For apartment buildings, it's every 6 years, and for HOAs and condo communities under SB 326, it's every 9 years. But their first deadline is the same, which is coming up actually January 1st, 2025. So basically at the end of this year.
Okay, and speaking of that date, what is it that they must do by that date?
So by January 1st, 2025, you must have your inspection completed. The inspection entails, it must be done by either a licensed contractor with at least 5 years of experience, an engineer, structural engineer, architect, or a building inspector. So somebody with the correct licensure and experience must do an inspection of the waterproofing elements of these the waterproofing components of these elements, as well as observe their load-bearing components. So the internal framing, the wood joists, everything like that. And this applies to these elements that are wood frame. So if it's steel or concrete, you're exempt. But if the element is made out of wood, you must get it thoroughly inspected. So we have to check all of the waterproofing components on the top, the surface, the decking, even its hand railing, and then also do tests to see inside of the element to make sure that all of the wood framing is still in good shape, doesn't have any dry rot. Water intrusion is probably the biggest one. So surface cracks, water can get inside, damage the wood. And unfortunately, these bills were created because a few years ago there was at UC Berkeley a balcony that collapsed, and that was due to my knowledge, the wrong type of wood was used, which then also, because of water intrusion and other issues that affected the integrity of the balcony, it collapsed and several students lost their lives. So because of this, the bills were passed, and just based on all of the inspections that we've been doing so far, we really support this bill, not just from a company perspective, but we're seeing how badly damaged a lot of these elements can be and the dangerous conditions that it's putting the tenants and residents in.
So Helen, what about a building that doesn't have balconies? However, there are handrails and walkways. Do they need to be addressed and retrofitted?
Great question, and we actually hear this a lot from clients and potential clients. Yes, absolutely. The law still applies to them because it applies to all elevated exterior elements, including those second floor, third floor walkways and their handrails. And another question that we get is regarding those handrails. I know a lot of clients are aware that their handrails may not meet current code, the certain height of 42 inches. So how we handle that is we may note it in the report that the handrail might not meet the 42 inches, or it may not, the balusters may not be close enough. However, we don't suggest in the report or recommend changing all of that. Regardless, if let's say that element though is affected and does need to be repaired, most likely the city plan checker will require the handrails for that affected element to be brought up to code, because they're going to require that everything pertaining to that element be brought up to code during its repair.
I've seen this very item many times in inspection reports when people are doing an inspection of the building, but yeah, and it just, I'm not sure it gets addressed.
Of course.
It normally gets passed down to the buyer to do after close of escrow, and yeah, so we see that a lot. So if there are balcony issues that are discovered during an inspection, is there a reporting requirement to the government?
So yes and no. So that depends on the local jurisdiction. In Los Angeles, the housing department does require a submission of the report, no matter what. However, other local jurisdictions require only emergencies, immediate threats must be reported. So if we do an inspection and we find that there is a balcony that poses an immediate threat to the habitants, we must report that to that local jurisdiction or the code enforcing agency. And then it's up to them basically what they do to enforce that getting repaired and getting fixed. And for all repairs, you have 120 days to pull the permit to repair any issue, and then 120 days thereafter to complete that repair.
Okay. I was just going to ask you, how long does it take, or how much time does an owner have to comply with the findings, the report findings?
I would say that the most critical or important piece is restricting access. So as soon as we're done with our inspection and we provide the report, so it's a two-part system, the inspection and then you get a detailed report, you must restrict access if there are these immediate threats. As long as you do that, you're at least safe, you're doing your due diligence. And then yes, as mentioned, for all suggested repairs, you have luckily some time, 120 days to pull that permit, and then 120 days after that to do the repair, and that's after receiving your report. So there is some wiggle room, of course, and as long as you're restricting access so that way nobody's in danger, you're okay.
Okay.
Are there delays generally that you're seeing in that process in terms of getting the permits or the work being done?
Sometimes there is if the city is taking a long time. However, usually 120 days has been plenty in order, even if something needs structural plans for a repair, if it's a lot of structural work, or just pulling a permit for things such as waterproofing is usually pretty quickly. But even if something needs plans and an engineering design, 120 days is plenty.
Okay.
Yeah, to pull that. And as long as you're doing those steps, you should be in compliance.
Now everyone wants to know, obviously, what are the costs involved, and especially with the January date coming up. So can you speak about the cost for the inspection and then separately the work involved? I know it depends, but approximately, if you can give an estimate.
Sure, of course. So again, as mentioned, these inspections are, done by engineers, contractors, and they're also paired with a thorough, detailed report, which has all the findings, which is stamped by the engineer. So the inspection and report cost starts typically around $1,500 to $2,500, and it goes up from there depending on the size of the community, size of the building, and of course the number of elements that you have, how high they are, if they're 3 stories, 4 stories, 5 stories high, as well as the linear feet. If you just have very long walkways, it could be hundreds of linear feet. So it starts $1,500 to $2,500 and goes up depending on the size of the community, number of elements, and length of the elements. And as far as the associated repairs, that can really the range for that is quite vast, because it could be something like just simply resealing a deck versus completely rebuilding a balcony. So it could resealing all the way to repairs can be, again, anywhere from $1,000 to hundreds of thousands if the community or the apartment building wasn't regularly maintained, which we always suggest every 3 to 5 years. Make sure you're doing some maintenance decking and resealing, prime and reseal. Otherwise, the lifespan on your waterproofing is typically only 10 years if you take care of it well.
Right.
So if you haven't resealed in decades, most likely all of that will have to come off, down to the plywood will have to be replaced. And then if you have structural damage and we have to rebuild, it can get very costly.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay, so can the contractor that's doing the inspection and the retrofit contractor be the same person or company?
So fortunately, yes. I know that there's been a lot of confusion because of that, because when the bills were originally passed in 2019, it did specifically prohibit the inspector from doing the repairs. However, I believe in 2021, SB 607, I think it is, amended that law and removed that prohibition. So luckily now the inspector can do the repair. And of course, if anybody's concerned about any conflict of interest, as long as the inspector is doing it properly and doing the inspection based on the law, you will see all of the details in that report. So if they are recommending any repairs, you should see all of the evidence and proof in that report, as long as they were doing beyond just a visual walkthrough of the top. If they were doing, what we do, bore holes with an endoscopic camera to see the load-bearing components and the structural framing, then you will see evidence if there is any issues compromising the joists or anything like that. So then you won't have to worry about any conflict of interest in that way.
Got it.
Okay.
So for an apartment building owner who has a building with balconies, how do they go about finding out if this law applies to them?
Okay, so the quickest way to check if this law applies to your building is, do you have any exterior balconies, decks, walkways, landings that are at least 6 feet above the ground and made out of wood? So even if you just see stucco surrounding it, most likely there's wood frame underneath. It's just surrounded by, waterproofing on the surface level and stucco veneer around it, but it is more than likely a wood frame. So if you have any elements like that, you are subject to the law. And the steps from there is call us, of course, or any trusted company to get your free quotes. The way we do that is by doing an element count first. We send our technician free of charge to count and measure all of the subjected elements, and then we provide you with an accurate quote. We don't do it just based on the number of units, because that's never accurate. Number of units won't tell us the linear feet of a walkway. Some units have more than one balcony. There may be several communal stairways and landings, different handrails. So we send somebody out to verify the counts, and then we provide a quote for you. And I always just say, make sure that when you're comparing quotes, make sure that the company doing it is doing both the visual as well as boreholes to see inside, because the law does specifically state you have to observe the load-bearing components. So some companies are just walking and then suggesting that you test and rip everything out, which then you may have to pay double. So make sure that your original quote includes kind of looking at the ins and outs of these elements.
That's good to know. Very good to know.
In your experience, is it mostly wood frame that you're seeing in the balconies, or is it a mix?
Yeah, I would say the majority of buildings are wood frame.
Okay.
Of course, there are some large communities that may have like a CMU podium, which is concrete, basically concrete blocks for that first floor or that parking garage. But then every floor above is now wood frame. So even those are still subject to the law because all of the balconies above are made out of wood. So I would say, yeah, most buildings we see are definitely subject to the law. And again, this applies to 3 units or more. So duplexes are exempt, single family exempt. And sometimes we'll see the steel and concrete stairways that lead to a wood frame stucco balcony. So the stairway might be exempt, but the walkway is still subject to the law.
Okay. Well, that's really great information. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your the resources you've provided. And Helen's information will be linked in the description below, along with ours. If there are any questions, please reach out to her at One Structural and us as well if you have any questions at all. Thank you.
Thank you.